Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. It's 11:01, so we might get started just as we're seeing a few more people start to join. Thanks again for joining us this morning. I'm Alex Hattingh and I head up People and Culture for Employment Hero, which really is an absolute dream job to be heading up people and culture for a company that's so obsessed with making employment easier and more rewarding for everyone. And today we really felt that it was pertinent to talk about effective one-on-ones, feedback, and communication for hybrid teams. Communication in this new world that we're so uncertain about is just so vital to helping all of you engage your employees and make sure you're getting the most out of them and keeping them as happy as you can during these uncertain times. So the world we live in now has literally changed overnight. The COVID impact, I think, for all of us out there as we look across our organisations, has seen us shift the way we approach sales, in the way we pitch to clients and prospects. Our marketing approach has changed. Our product roadmaps have changed. We have everyone working from home or remotely, or we have a hybrid where we have some people going into the office because they can't work from home effectively. So it really begs the problem, how do we engage our people during these times where there is massive change occurring? The employee experience is now more vital than ever. And there are a lot of employee engagement strategies that you can engage in, everything from reward and recognition to learning and development, flexible learning and working, and team bonding activities. And a lot of these, unfortunately, aren't necessarily available or easy to do as we have this remote world that we're working in. So I just wanted to touch on how management philosophy and approaches have changed over the decades, starting with the industrial corporation and moving all the way through to hierarchical leadership, collaborative management. And then if you look in 2019, which was really only yesterday, we were looking at a company as a network where there was a real focus on mission, purpose, and sustainability, empowering the teams. We were looking up to the Netflix of this world, the Googles, the Facebooks, and the Amazons. And we were looking at teams and team leaders as really leading from the front. And then we've seen this shift overnight, 1 year, and we're really looking as managers and leaders at focusing on empathy, trust, resilience, and growth. And we're looking at companies like Patagonia, who are doing such a great job, as well as trying to focus on the individual within your organisation, the wider community, which is really important during COVID and what we're going through, as well as the family, both the families of our employees and what you might call your family within your organisation. So let's focus on internal communication and how we can use it more broadly to make sure that we are getting the most out of our employees and using internal communication to really engage employees during this time. It might beg the question, how would you define internal communication? It's a group of processes or tools that are responsible for effective information flow and collaboration among participants within any organisation. And why do we need internal communication strategies? For some, it might be really obvious. Daniel Pink did years and years of research into human motivation, and he found that there were 3 innate psychological needs that we need as humans to be motivated and to have the drive to do our best. And they are competency in what we do, autonomy, so trust, give us trust, and relatedness. We want to know how what we do in our role relates to the broader purpose and OKRs or goals for the company. Now, when these needs are satisfied, we're motivated, productive, and happy. So through a robust internal communication strategy, you can achieve these things and have your employees be motivated, engaged, and happy. Now, when Harvard Business Review did a study and they looked at communication issues that prevent effective leadership, the top errors that managers and leaders were making was not giving clear directions to their employees, simply not having the time to meet with their employees, and would you believe actually refusing to talk to subordinates. They also did a bit of further digging into what the cost of poor internal communication was. And they found that an average of 12% of working time was wasted due to avoidable inefficiency if things were communicated better. And 35% of a disengaged employee's salary was wasted. And companies with those disengaged employees have a much higher rate of turnover at a high 34%. So what are some effective communication tips in our new remote world of work? And this is from our personal experience of trying and reiterating where we're all novices at this remote world of work. We found that cadence is absolutely vital. Having a real routine so your employees know where and when they'll be communicated to. So daily stand-ups for your teams are a really great idea. A weekly team meeting where as managers and leaders you're cascading important business updates and information across the business. Weekly one-on-ones, which we'll deep dive into, as well as company meetings, which you might call a town hall or an all hands. Also make sure you provide your employees with the tools that they need to use and when. So why do you use Slack or Teams and when do you use it? When's it appropriate to use a Zoom meeting or a meetup? And when is it appropriate to email? A really good example is don't bombard your employees with newsletters or emails where they're having to read through information. You want to be real time and cascading that information in a personal manner over video as much as you can. Transparency, we've also found, is really important and appreciated, especially during this time of COVID. And that is, if you can't answer a question, let your employees know that. We're all living this uncertain time, especially for those in Victoria, and our hearts do go out to all of our Victorians for going through the current lockdown that you are, and also the uncertainty that's occurring in New South Wales as well. If you're getting questions from your employees about what next steps are, let them know what you've got in the works, but also let them know that you don't know necessarily what's going to happen, and we are a little bit reliant on the COVID circumstance, and you'll keep them updated as much as you can. And they just seem to appreciate that honesty. In terms of effective communication, listening is also really important. One of the things I've personally found really challenging in this remote world of work is not having the ability to read body language and people's temperaments as you might see them around the office or see them on video calls. You're really focused on facial, visual cues. So make sure you're surveying your employees and listening to them. Even if you can't give them a yes to what they're asking for, let them know why. Just let them know that they've been heard. One-on-ones are really important. And again, keeping that cadence of meetings so that employees know when they're going to hear about things and they get excited and they look forward to it. It helps to keep up that motivation. If you look at our company vision, we start with our purpose, vision, values, and BHAG, which we do revisit each quarter. However, we have a massive focus on that during induction and onboarding. Annually, we have our goals and our objectives and key results. We also have quarterly what we call themes and objectives and key results. Monthly, we do reviews or check-ins, surveys, and reports as well to our employees on where we're at with sales, leads, opportunities, implementations and go lives, every metric across the business so that we're transparent with employees about where we're at and how we're performing. Weekly, we do one-on-one coaching, and we also introduced weekly all hands once we went to remote work. We did do it on a fortnightly basis. Daily, we do team huddles, we talk about targets, and we try to have a social kind of chit-chat or drop-in for those who might want to speak to people outside their team. Hourly, we do announcements and recognition through our own tool, Employment Hero, as well as on Slack. And you can easily do this through Teams if you don't have Slack. And that's all about getting into the rhythm of thanking someone for doing their job, but that shout out when we're remote can be really, really important. And in terms of minutes, constant chat and video. We also use a 4x3 communication cadence, and that is leadership check-ins on 3 days a week and video messages once a week from our CEO. In terms of our company, as I mentioned, We do a weekly all hands. We have Slack channels, which you can also create on Teams if you use Microsoft. And that keeps chat to a channel, for example, a product channel or a sales channel or a marketing channel or a people and culture channel. So it's really easy for employees to go back and look at prior history and conversations, and they're not having to go through emails. We do Friday night happy hour after our all hands, and we do weekly team updates on Slack as well, again, so people can go back in their own time and look at what other teams are doing. From a team perspective, we have whips and we have cross-team catch-ups. So sales and marketing catch-up, for example, product and marketing catch-up. I catch up with a lot of cross-functional teams as well. And from an individual perspective, we'll cover one-on-ones, as well as we can cover performance management. So how have we kept the energy up? Just taking it one step further as we go through remote first. Again, we're all novices at this, and we have to admit in some areas we fail and we don't get it right every time, and that's where asking for constant feedback through surveys and at team meetings is really important. But for things like our all hands and our daily check-ins, we're asking people to turn their video on unless they have bad internet connection or they really are Zoom fatigued. We have objectives and key results. We have a lot of reward and recognition and celebrations, both through Slack as well as through Employment Hero. We do surveys. We have one-on-one templates which really allow you to capture that conversation between a manager and an employee. And it gives both the manager and the employee the opportunity to go back and have a reminder of what you've talked about or what might need following up on. We've found theming our all hands has been really fun. Examples have been wear your favourite sports team's gear, and then you might have a bit of an award at the next all hands for the person that won that. Your favourite cocktail, bring that to the happy hour at the end of the all hands. And theming them up just means some people go to all extremes and it makes it fun. The best Zoom background is another one. We've found a virtual Hangouts channel has been really good for people to drop in, especially if they're lonely or they might be feeling a bit isolated. We have a lot of expats, and we also have a lot of younger people working for us who might find that they're at home with 3 flatmates, all confined to their bedroom. So it can be really nice for them to have somewhere to virtually check in with everyone and just have that social connection. As well as having a bit of fun on Slack or Teams is also really great. So we have an animals being cute channel, for example. We have a social channel, and sharing things on those channels down to videos of your dog or your cat really keeps things fun for everyone, and it can help to break up people's days when you find you're on video call after video call. So Julia, if we could launch our first poll, we just wanted to check in with everyone to see how your internal communications are going, and have you changed your strategy or cadence since remote work has kicked in? Wow, so we have a whopping, I'll end the poll now. Yeah, a whopping 87% of people have said that they have changed their cadence since we started, and so only 13% have not. And at the end of this, we might ask for some ideas in the chat channel around what people have been doing and what they've found to be successful. Moving on to strategy 1 after internal communications is all about one-on-ones. Now, I love this Dilbert cartoon because it makes a lot of fun about one-on-ones. However, they need to be weekly now that we're doing this remote first. And in allowing remote first, I don't think we'll ever go back to the way we did work. The office will be something different. We've even moved to calling ours the hub, where it's going to be all about social connections moving forward and a place to go and work should you need to and should you want to. So absolutely vital if you're a manager to be having this weekly cadence of one-on-ones and only rescheduling them when necessary and giving your direct report a reason if you are having to reschedule. Of course, we always have conflicts. So Gallup did some great research into one-on-ones and the impact on engagement, and regularly scheduled meetings with a manager are critical to your employees' engagement. On average, only 15% of employees who work for a manager who does not meet with them regularly are engaged. On the flip side, if you meet with your employees regularly, their engagement tripled on that 15% just by having that weekly one-on-one. So what are one-on-ones? It's a scheduled meeting in your calendar and also in your mental map for an open-ended and anticipated conversation between a manager and an employee. Unlike a status report or tactical meetings, a one-on-one is a place for coaching, mentorship, giving context, or even venting. Let your employee vent if that's what they need to do. The one-on-one goes way beyond you having an open door policy, and it dedicates regular time and cadence for your team members to connect with you and to communicate with you. So, how do you actually hold an effective one-on-one? Always ask open questions, and we will be sending a template out for you to use that will be helpful after this. Start with asking your employee, how are they feeling? What's on your mind? Where are your roadblocks? And how can I help? Now be really, really careful that you listen. This is about your employee. So make sure they feel safe, empowered, and heard. Next, your role as a manager is to facilitate solutions. Now, this is a lot easier than it sounds because as a manager, we all have an innate kind of desire to jump in and solve problems. But this asking open-ended questions really provides you that coaching opportunity to not spout out solutions and to help your employee grow and help them think and own of their own solutions. So by creating a space of trust, the best place to start is to make sure that you've heard your employee when you ask those open-ended questions. So just reaffirm, have I heard you correctly, Alex? This is what you're saying in terms of how you're feeling. How can I help? Or how can we make you feel less isolated, feel better, have a better day? And quite often disclosing your own weaknesses, so places where you've gone wrong in the past in your career and being a little bit vulnerable, really creates that psychological safety that your employees need more than ever during this COVID time. And always be on their side, especially if you're giving candid, blunt feedback for growth. Make sure you let your employee know that you're there to support them, champion them, develop them, and help them. Again, you're creating that psychological safety where they might actually say, Alex, thank you for the feedback. I kind of knew that it was coming, but I don't know where to go next. And that gives you that coaching opportunity where they've said to you, I don't know what to do. Please help me. And make sure you always respect the person. It's a person on the other end of the one-on-one or the Zoom video call as we have it at the moment. They're not just a performer of tasks. So try and treat them as a peer during your one-on-one, and that way your coaching will really come through rather than being a top-down manager where you're appearing to just give solutions and throw answers at someone. You're not making them feel heard if you're doing that. The next side to one-on-ones as you think through this is, what if you're not a manager? How do you best leverage your one-on-one if you are an individual contributor? Or if you manage someone, but you also have a leader, how do you best kind of manage up? So just keep in mind that the one-on-one is your time to express what's on your mind. You might want to brainstorm ideas or talk about your future goals. So try and set aside time prior to your meeting to organise what you want to talk about, and the template that we send out will hopefully help you do that. A great idea is to block time in your calendar the day before your weekly one-on-one or the morning of your weekly one-on-one. If you're feeling frustrated or overwhelmed, make sure you note this down. It can be really good to script it so that, one, you don't forget to tell your manager that's how you're feeling and ask for help with roadblocks. And secondly, if you might be feeling a little bit nervous or anxious about broaching a topic such as, I am feeling frustrated, I am feeling lost, I'm working from home and people aren't getting back to me on Slack, for example, if you script that, it can really help you be vulnerable and ask your manager for help as to how to work through it. Remain really open when you go to a one-on-one about what's really going on in your world, especially as we work remotely. Ask your manager where you need support. And remember to ask for what you want in layman's terms. Back to putting your manager hat on, confirming or reaffirming what you've heard. So remember, no one can read your mind, and what you might be expressing in your head might make sense, but you might need to give an example, and that's your responsibility to make sure your manager actually understands, rather than just saying, I'm frustrated. You're actually giving an example as to why you might be frustrated. I'm not getting enough direction. I don't feel I'm getting enough recognition for what I'm doing. I feel that the team aren't displaying teamwork as we're working remotely, or I feel that workloads are not evenly distributed. There's some really good examples of what might make you frustrated, but by simply saying to your manager, I'm frustrated, you're not leveraging your one-on-one to the best of your advantage to make sure you're happier in your job, more engaged and more productive. This is just a quick view of how one-on-ones work through Employment Hero, and that is where you can schedule them to occur regularly at any time, and rescheduling is super easy as well. We also provide some really great questions to kick off your one-on-one, and then the template allows you to also throw in any of your own questions. Since launching this, we internally have had fantastic feedback, especially around how it does facilitate these great conversations and connections between managers and employees, and it captures it in a safe place where employees and managers can always go back. This is completely confidential, only between the manager and the employee. Admins don't have access to it, HR doesn't have access to it, and the manager's manager doesn't have access to it, providing that nice psychological safety that as managers we do need to be providing to our employees. So we'd love to launch poll number 2, and that is of course all focused on one-on-ones, and that is checking in on everyone on how often you actually hold your polls, sorry, your one-on-ones. Just let that go for one more minute. Okay. Great, so out of 156 responses, sorry, I'll just pop that over to the screen. So we have 35% holding them weekly, 24% fortnightly, monthly 15%, 17% not at all, and 8 other, which might mean you're holding them ad hoc as your employees ask for them. I can't implore you enough with the feedback we've had to make sure that you are trying to do this weekly, or at least have it in your calendar weekly while we're working from home. It's really, really important. You don't have to use the time. You can literally, if you've got it scheduled weekly, you can pile into a one-on-one, and your employee might say, I don't actually have anything for you, Alex, because we've covered everything this week and there's nothing on my mind. You might have a social connection for 5 or 10 minutes and then call it a day. At least it's in the calendar and it's there, and it makes your employee feel valued, which is so important. Strategy 2, when it comes to communications and leveraging this in this remote work environment, is feedback. So Marcus Buckingham, who's done years upon years of research and actually started with the Gallup organisation and has since gone out to become his own researcher. The premise of feedback is to help people do better, to thrive and excel. So what is feedback? So it's about telling people what we think of their performance and how they should do it better, whether they're giving an effective presentation, leading a team, or creating a strategy. It could also be giving someone feedback about how they're performing on their OKRs, perhaps giving them feedback that their OKRs aren't aspirational enough. So why give feedback? It's a key ingredient to your success. Think about your own career to date. Without anyone giving you feedback, you would never have known where you could have improved. Now, junior on in your career, it can sometimes be really difficult to hear constructive feedback, but once you know how to frame it in your own mind, you can apply it really well. And studies have shown through Gallup that 4 out of 5 employees appreciate both positive and negative feedback. Again, through Gallup, 40% of respondents, over hundreds of thousands of organisations of people with little or no feedback, identify themselves as actively disengaged. So when it comes to employee engagement, employees who receive feedback, good or bad, at least once a week, are twice as likely to be highly engaged and highly productive as a result. However, giving feedback can be difficult. So the research doesn't lie. Feedback is king, in theory, but it's not so easy. Social anxieties can make it really difficult for us as managers to give employees feedback, and it can also make it even more difficult to give cross-functional feedback to a peer or to someone who might be more senior than you or someone who's never had constructive feedback before. And it's even harder while we work in this remote working from home world. And if you're spread across different locations and time zones. We do also have an awesome feedback feature that facilitates giving feedback in Employment Hero. However, you don't need that to give feedback. So who uses feedback? You've got managers who are going to be giving feedback to their direct reports who need coaching and improvement. And then you've got employees who might want to give feedback to managers, or they might want to give feedback to their peers, or to someone cross-functionally, and that can be great feedback about a presentation or constructive feedback about a presentation. And in our own tool, employees can easily view their feedback and they can identify their own strengths and areas for improvement. Now, if you're not a customer or user of Employment Hero, there are many different ways that you can capture feedback to be giving to employees, and I certainly recommend it's not done via email. So feedback has recently been in the spotlight. You've got Kim Scott, who's talked a lot about radical candor, and that's about really giving feedback in real time and making sure it's constructive. You've got Patty McCord, who's famously headed up people and culture at Netflix and has now gone out into her own consultancy. And Brené Brown in Dare to Lead, who again talks about being brave through conversations, which has also been covered in Harvard Business Review about why feedback fails and all about how criticizing people doesn't help them excel. So very, very mixed feedback. However, Patty does make a really great point in her book Powerful, and that is the best feedback is in the moment. So rather than waiting months for a formal meeting to tell a colleague or a co-worker or a peer or a direct report that you didn't like the way a meeting went, a presentation went, or a project went, I mean, at that point, the feedback is really obsolete. You can barely remember what happened as the person receiving the feedback, let alone the peer or the manager that's giving the feedback. So it's all about real time. So how do you do this in terms of the art of giving feedback, especially as we work remotely? So day-to-day feedback happens fairly organically during conversations. A really good example, Alex, you could improve your knowledge on this particular topic by speaking to Dave, who's a subject matter expert in the topic. Now, this becomes more difficult when you're working from home, but something like that is feedback that isn't constructive or going to be damaged or misconstrued. So you can certainly give that over Slack. More structured feedback that you want to give back in real time should be given using a feature, but you really need to think about how you're going to structure that, and I'll talk you through it. And you might want to do this so it's captured in a central place for the person and for their manager to look back on. And you have the ability to act on feedback immediately. So let's say, for example, for a presentation, you might want to act immediately on giving feedback around, Alex, that was a good presentation. However, I really would have liked it if you'd given some examples and some more detail on topic A, B, and C. Always be mindful, though, that there are certain types of feedback that you always need to give in a conversation. And this is by video in the world that we're living in at the moment. So try and book time in someone's calendar or quickly shoot them a message and say, Alex, I've got some feedback on the meeting we just had. Let me know when you've got time for a quick Zoom video, a quick meetup, or a quick Slack video, and make sure it's a conversation. Document it afterwards, but it's so important to do that over video because it might be constructive feedback that that person needs to hear, that you're more experienced so you can give it to them, but it needs to be a two-way discussion so it's not misconstrued and so that the person can ask questions and reaffirm and clarify the feedback that you're giving to them. Now, sometimes you have to be brave to be able to give that feedback, but think in your own terms and your own career about where feedback has really helped you excel in your role or improve in your own performance. So in terms of thinking about giving feedback, I like to approach it in a situation behaviour impact model. So describe the situation, the behaviour, what did the person do, and what was the impact of that behaviour on the person, the team, or whoever it might have been. So if you're to think about this as a manager, the situation might be, Alex, at the client meeting earlier today, then you talk about the behaviour. You balanced sharing ideas with hearing from them and asking for the client's feedback. You then talk about the impact, and this is positive. The client told me, Alex, that they thought we were clearly understood and we understood their needs. So thanks, Alex. You did really well in the meeting. Some negative feedback. Again, you start with the situation. Alex, when you presented your proposal to our client, you presented everything succinctly. However, I observed that you did not listen to the client when they interjected. You spoke over their comments and you did not acknowledge their concerns. I observed our client shaking their head, illustrating their displeasure, meaning they didn't walk away with a good experience. And you know what the impact was, Alex? We didn't close the deal. So in doing this, you're removing yourself and any personal bias or anything around attitudes, and you're really honing in on the behaviour, and you're describing to someone who might report to you the actual impact of their behaviour. Another really good example might be, Alex, I noticed that Julia walked up to you in the office the other day and you flogged her off because you were too busy and involved in what you were doing. The impact of that is that you're not living our teamwork value, because you appeared to everyone who was sitting around you that you weren't open to a discussion. So update your Slack, have your headphones on next time so that Julia knows that you're too busy to help and that she needs to book some time in your calendar. SBI and applying it to interpersonal feedback. So this might be peer-to-peer, or it might be me giving feedback to someone on another team, product, for example, or support or sales. So you start with the situation. At the team meeting, Alex, when we discussed your project, you interrupted teammates as they shared their ideas. As a result, people stopped contributing as much. Team members felt disengaged. Alex, did you notice this? So you're really pointing out to me that during the meeting, I was interrupting and talking over people, but you're also associating with that the impact that I had on the rest of the team, and you're asking me if I noticed it. So you're really making me think back to the meeting and what happened at that meeting. Now, if you're doing interpersonal, peer, or cross-team feedback, always try and follow up with what you want and what you need. So there's a reason you're giving this feedback. So in this situation, it's Alex. Okay, now that we've talked about this, I need you to wait and listen as team members give their ideas. And I want you to consider when to back down or drop an issue. And then you might even want to make a note in your own calendar for the next time you go to a meeting with this particular individual to follow up with them at the end of the meeting to see if their behaviour has continued or if they've improved. And if they've improved, absolutely give them the recognition. Alex, you did great in that meeting. You were really opened and you let people talk. Or, I saw the behaviour again, so let's make a note of how we're going to action this and improve it. Or, it could also become an anti-goal where in a meeting, I stop talking altogether. So again, as someone who's observing and given this feedback, you need to be aware of it the next time to say, you know what, Alex, you did great. You let people speak. The team were engaged. They were really talking. However, I noticed that you've now rescinded and you stopped speaking and giving your ideas so much. So now we need to balance how you behave in meetings to make sure that you are giving your ideas because you have great ideas. So that could end up in kind of 3 ways. Now, you need to prepare when you're using the SBI model. So think about what your intention is. What would a successful outcome look like? And then frame it up. What was the situation? What did the person do? And what was the impact of their behaviour on you or other teammates or peers? And what information do you have to support what you will say? So what did you observe in what the person actually did where you can give them that constructive situation, behaviour, impact feedback? Now, if you're emotionally charged about the feedback, think about how you can prepare for giving the feedback, whether that's using a tool or whether it's simply scripting it up. And you can script it up and say to the person, look, I'm a bit nervous about giving this feedback because I'm emotionally charged. So I've scripted it and I'm going to read it out, or I'm going to whiteboard it for you. Also have a little bit of a think about how the person might respond or react. We're all humans, and some people might be more emotional, some people might just sit there silent and not show you how they're responding or reacting. So think about how you'll prepare for this. If someone's going to be emotional and upset, do show the empathy and give them some time to actually digest the information and organise a follow-up meeting. If they're completely silent, try and probe and say to them, Alex, how are you feeling? You're not responding. Can we talk about this further? And just try and elicit and probe information out of them. And also assess how are you going to give the feedback. Is it something you're going to give them really quickly over Slack after a meeting, after a project, after a team meeting, or you may have seen behaviour on Zoom or in the office? So are you just going to give that to them that way, or are you going to actually set up a quick Zoom call, which might look like a Slack or a team message that says, Alex, wanted to give you some feedback on your presentation or our project meeting. Let me know when you've got 10 minutes to run through this. This is just a really quick view of what feedback looks like through our Employment Hero tool. We have a tool that is called Feedback, and it allows you to give immediate feedback to an employee. Again, I never recommend that anyone uses this tool for feedback that's constructive and requires that situation, behaviour, impact model. It's more used for quick feedback around, I wanted to let you know you did an incredible job with the recent induction. Can you please survey the members to follow up on how we can improve? That's an example of something you might use the feedback tool for. You also might use it for great presentation, thoroughly enjoyed it. However, I do need more detail on A, B, and C. Can you please follow up with the team and send this information out to them because I felt it was missing from your presentation. So how do you introduce and implement a strong cadence of one-on-ones and feedback across your team? And this is especially important for those people that responded to our poll who aren't doing weekly one-on-ones. So implement a cadence and make the cadence transparent to everyone in your organisation, because what this does is it gives employees who aren't having weekly one-on-ones permission to either ask their manager for a weekly one-on-one or just go ahead and book it in. You can say, hey, Alex, I noticed that we're now doing weekly one-on-ones. I've thrown it into your calendar to make sure that we don't miss this cadence. Hold your managers accountable for this cadence. Make sure you're checking in on them that they are doing it. And to give your managers a call to action, give them some of the statistics around the research and impact of one-on-ones, how much more engaged employees are by having weekly one-on-ones, how much more productive they are by having weekly one-on-ones. You're creating a burning platform by giving them this kind of research and data. So we were thinking about practical takeaways, and we might run through some questions that have come into the Q&A box. But do you have one-on-ones in your organisation? And if you don't, let's get that cadence in to make sure that you are engaging and providing that platform for a connection between managers and their employees, and the psychological safety to be coaching them and helping them where they might not be doing well. After today's session, we'll be sending you this slide deck. We'll be sending you a one-on-one guide and template so that you can get started. And even having a meeting like this with your managers to show them how to have a one-on-one. Some managers don't know how, and they just need that help to get going, such as a template and a cadence of knowing to go ahead and book it in. So if you do have a session with your managers, make sure you give them an action to go back to their computers by the end of the day to book in a one-on-one with each and every one of their direct reports. So I don't know, Julia, I can't see the Q&A box if we have questions in, or if people did want to unmute their mics or throw in chats any great ideas that they have implemented since working from home as it pertains to communication that they've found really engaging and that they've had great feedback on. Or if you have any questions that we can help with. I can see Bernadette's raised a hand. Here we are, I have some questions here. See if I can get them on my screen. Apologies. I will read them from the other screen. Some of us work in a not-for-profit sector, so can your examples or references not assume we are all in commercial settings? Yeah, my apologies. I didn't mean to assume that we were all in commercial settings. Yes, we have a lot of people that work in the not-for-profit sector. I still recommend weekly one-on-ones for those in the not-for-profit sector. Again, coming back to that engagement piece, the psychological safety piece, and the connection piece. When we're working from home and we're working remotely, you're not having that daily hello, the chance to go out for coffee, team meetings, the chance to just pass each other in the kitchen. This one-on-one cadence, if you're in no matter what sector, really does help you to garner that connection and make sure it's a regular connection. If it's new to a manager or an employee, it might feel uncomfortable over video to start with. I guarantee you will get more comfortable and more used to it the more often you do it. We also have another question. Hi, I have an employee on the other side of the country. So looking for some advice on managing employees in different time zones, especially when performance issues arise. Okay, yeah, it is really tough working across different geographies, and what you want to do is make sure that you are very flexible with your work time. So let's just say you have an employee in the UK, for example. Make sure you set aside time during the week where you're actually going to work after dinner or just a bit later in the day, and let your team know and update your calendar that you'll be starting later the next morning. So let's say you pick Wednesdays at 6 p.m. to have your one-on-ones and give feedback to your UK employees. Let your entire global team know that on a Thursday morning you're starting at 10 a.m, 11 a.m, or whatever time it might be that suits your flexible work arrangement to allow yourself to cover those time zones. It's really tricky. I've covered 14 countries over the APAC region in a prior role, and so you just need to make sure you're managing your time throughout that, giving your employees the feedback that will help them grow and in turn make your job easier as a manager because they're executing more effectively on their role, but also keeping a lens on yourself and your own mental capacity, mental wellness, and mental health in terms of managing your time, getting your sleep, and managing your own calendar. Another question from Greg Hill. How do you manage to deliver all of the great engagement without an HR P&C team or even staff member to drive it? Great question, Greg. And if you're fortunate enough to have an HR technology system like Employment Hero, this becomes really easy to do. However, Greg, I recommend you get a couple of managers and leaders across your organisation, preferably led from the top, as in your CEO, to really drive these easy tools across the company and to lead by example. So if your CEO mandates regular weekly one-on-ones, you will absolutely start to see them happen. You'll start to see managers really look at the advantages of their employees being more engaged, happier, and more productive, again, making the manager's life easier. Another question. Your advice and approach to one-on-ones is great and is very practical and topical, especially as we're working remotely and need to adapt our style even for those seasoned leaders. Oh, thank you. A question from Elise. Is there any way for admins to report on one-on-ones have occurred? Elise, I'll follow up with you on that. It is something that's on our product roadmap to report out on. We've got a manager dashboard at the moment that you'll know where you can look at things like OKRs and goals. How have they been put in there? We can report out on performance reviews. We're looking at how to report out on the usage of one-on-ones. So that's absolutely being looked into. Thank you. That's a great point. Another question. Did I hear correctly that admin doesn't have oversight on the one-on-one comments? I would have a couple of concerns here. Our leaders often need feedback on how they provide feedback. And given this is so locked down, I would be worried about the lack of monitoring for inappropriate comments, potential for damaging feedback and bullying. That's a great other side to the question of having admins being able to have visibility into the one-on-one comments. So my recommendation there is, first of all, our stance on them being confidential is to allow that that private time between a manager and an employee and to create that psychological safety. My recommendation there is that you're checking in on your managers and also surveying your employees. How are your one-on-ones going? And then if you get someone reaching out to you to say they're not going well, sit down with that manager in front of their computer and actually have a look at their one-on-one template on their screen so that you can give them some coaching around not using such harsh language, for example, or they might be using really short sentences and they need to expand on that dialogue. And that kind of feedback for a manager is super helpful from someone who has that experience in people and culture or HR. Another question. Did you say that the one-on-one feature in EH can only be viewed? Yes, yep, we've already covered that one. Nicole, we work in long day care centres, still fully operating in New South Wales, not work from home. We have designed and rolled out one-on-one templates, run training, and people managers agree, but month by month rolls by and none are completed. Again, Nicole, this is a really tough one. You need to start to hold your managers accountable. I would give them a goal or an OKR to have one-on-ones completed 100% of the time. Again, it can be in a calendar and you may have your employee say to your manager, I don't have anything this week because we've already caught up on everything. Then you might use it as a 5 or 10 minute social connection time and then, kind of close it off within 10 minutes, and that's absolutely fine, but make it a goal for your managers, a KPI, something that they're actually measured on. Again, yep, Nicole's asked the same question. And then I've got another question. Is it ever okay to give feedback in writing, assuming you follow this model? It is, provided you don't feel that the person is going to get emotional about the feedback or misconstrue the feedback. So if you are going to give this in writing, I would actually bullet point out situation, behaviour, impact, and then what do you need or want in terms of the person's behaviour changing. Back to that example I gave about speaking over team members in a meeting and giving them more time to speak. That's a really fine example to give in writing, but do follow up with what you need or expect. So at the next meeting, I would like you not to talk over people. I would like you to allow others to contribute, and I'd like you to go a step further and recognise really great contributions during the meeting. Also be mindful that that person doesn't turn this into being kind of something that's anti and they become completely quiet during the meeting. Another question, can you recommend some good newsletters or sites to subscribe to keep us updated with best practices? I'll be completely biased here and say Employment Hero Resource Centre. We have the most incredible in-house marketing team who have all absolutely just grown into their own mini HR specialists, advisors, people and culture experts, and they are consistently updating our resource centre. So please go there. There are so many resources there that you can use to upskill yourself. It really is fantastic, and the team just do so well. Another question. What if it's an attitude issue I'm giving feedback on versus specific behavioural issues? Great question. And this is where the SBI model is so good. You have to be really careful when you use the word attitude because it's very, very subjective. So write down in your own time and space, what attitude are you seeing? And how can you turn that attitude into something observable? So if you're having trouble thinking in terms of behaviour, think of something you can observe or see. So it might be a latitude of lax. So you might think, but you can't really say to someone in a constructive way, Alex, I think you're just being really lax towards your work at the moment. It's much better if you can think of it in an observable manner, which is, Alex, I've noticed over the last few weeks, you're not as engaged and you're not contributing during our team meetings. I need this to improve so that I can have you contribute. Is there anything going on that I can help with? Are you feeling disengaged? And try and probe into why you might be seeing that attitude from the person, but flip it to something that's observable that they can relate to. What is it? There's something you've observed in that person to see a shift in attitude. So just write down the attitude and then write down, what have I observed? Is it that they're not contributing? Is it that they're not having their video turned on? There can be all sorts of visual cues and observations around their behaviour that will help you put it into a situation behaviour impact scenario. Marina, what is the best time frame for a one-on-one? Yeah, 30 minutes is absolutely perfect. You can extend it to 45 minutes if you've got a smaller team, you've got the bandwidth and your team are managing more. 30 minutes though is a perfect time, especially if you have a template that's been pre-populated. It means both your employee is coming having thought about what topics they want to talk to, and it gives you the opportunity to also pre-read and prepare yourself for the one-on-one. Venice, would love to hear other people's ideas as what has been fun on group activities. Does anyone want to unmute or raise their hand about fun activities? As an example, we are introducing a celebration coming up on August the 21st across all of our geographies, and that is a trivia night, and that's being hosted by a professional MC. It's at a cost of $30 per person, and it will take about 2 hours, and it's going to put people in cross-functional teams, and they'll be kind of ported into their own Zoom rooms to work on their trivia questions. Then they'll come back to the group, and they will present their questions or answers for the winner. Does anyone else have ideas? I saw 4 people raise their hands, but well, feel free to unmute yourself if you do have more ideas. There's lots of other fun things that we've done, and we can send a link out after this around a culture bundle that the marketing team have come up with more fun ideas that you'd be able to do. And from Danielle, if HR doesn't have access to the one-on-ones, how do you ensure all managers are completing them within their teams? So again, I would recommend sending out a survey to all of your employees and simply saying to them, are your one-on-ones occurring? And going back to management and saying, if it's anonymous, only 30% of you guys are doing your one-on-ones. Here are the reasons you should be doing them. We're actually going to implement a KPI whereby you as a manager are now going to be measured on holding your one-on-ones and being accountable for them. And go back to the research of showing how engaged employees are by having those regular one-on-ones. A question from Laura. What are ideas for the all-ins? It's starting to get stale being remote. Great question, Annette. It can get stale if you don't have content, so try and have a bit of a cadence. And what I mean around that is at the end of each quarter, the first all hands town hall, whatever you might call it, have a sales and marketing update, and then flip to another team, have a product update, and then flip to another team, have a support update, and then flip to another team and have another update, so that you're constantly having fresh ideas. And even if you rotate the teams, they know that their turn is coming up. And again, going back to listening to your employees, what do they want to hear? Maybe sending out a really short survey about what they want to hear at the upcoming Friday or the fortnightly Friday can be a really good thing. And something we've found that works really well at the moment with remote work is we're ending all of our all hands with a virtual shout out, and we try to make that cross team as much as we can. So not managers calling out their employees, but how can I call out a different team to people and culture, such as marketing or product or finance, and some of the amazing things they've done during the week. It's a really special way to end the week and to make people feel really good. People know it's coming, so they think, and they'll be on video, and it just creates a really nice interaction. How do you get everyone to engage in the surveys? Great question, Tanya. It really is about making a survey timely, quick and short. So not 64 questions, for example, 5 questions, 10 questions, and making sure you read out the results in a real-time manner. So you might start off seeing participation low in an employee survey. However, if you start regularly reading out results and being super transparent about those results, people will start to give feedback more because they'll see that you're listening to them and that leadership is taking action. And when I say being transparent, it's about people are not feeling good about this. Here's some action items. People are feeling great about this. People have asked for money to help set themselves up from home. At the moment, we're a little bit strapped for budget and cash and the uncertainty of COVID. So unfortunately, we can't provide a stipend at the moment. Now, whilst it might be not what people want to hear, you're being transparent in telling people why you can't action something, which is really helpful. Okay, Jeanette, do you have any tips for getting the team talking? I have found that the Friday weekly wrap-up discussion can get to a point where people are just not talking. It's awkward and they don't seem to want to do the fun themed meetings. Yeah, Jeanette, I think we're going through a really interesting period. So COVID happened and everyone started working from home and we all got into the fun of things. Now I think we've entered a phase where people are tired, there's uncertainty, and so we need to be addressing this as leadership teams and being transparent around, are you feeling uncertain? We'll also send out a COVID-19 check-in survey where you can check in on how people are feeling productive from home, how they're feeling, are you doing enough for them? But it's also a really great idea, Jeanette, to plant a couple of seeds. So pick a couple of extroverts across your company and ask them to get involved in the discussion. Give them maybe a starter for a question, ask them to do a shout out. A really good example is we have some shy teams within our company, and before a Friday Recognise a Teammate, I will actually ping a couple of people and say, Gigi, would you mind calling out a team or two, or getting a few engineers to call out a couple of teams for what they've worked on, prep them, tell them not to be shy, and we're starting to see it happen a lot more, which is really good. Another question for those who are able to stay on, from Tanya. Does the owner have access to the one-on-one information? You said the admin doesn't. No, they don't, Tanya, and that's to allow for confidentiality between a manager and an employee. Any suggestions on how to reward staff that doesn't require monetary outlay? In the disability industry, there is no funding or admin costs. Yeah, reward and recognition is so easy when you don't have money or monetary rewards. What you do need is the technology to enable it. So if you have Slack or Teams or Employment Hero or any of those things that allow you to recognise people on a regular hourly basis, get your leaders to start championing that and calling things out on certain channels. So we created a celebrations channel since we've started working from home, and that's a channel where anyone can go in during the day and celebrate a fellow team member, a closed sale, an implementation's gone live, solving a certain number of tickets if you're in support, releasing a product feature if you're in the engineering or product team, and we get lots of engagement on that channel. And I know that the employees feel really fantastic, especially when there's cross-team recognition, and it really is so rewarding, even though there's no money kind of associated with it. And what you can then do is accumulate that, going back to the all hands getting a bit tiring at the moment when people are feeling isolated. You can then round up for a summary, and you can do a slide of the most recognised people during the week, and you're then reinforcing values, behaviours, great things that people have done at that Friday wrap. The next question, how do you manage one-on-ones with staff who are not in the office, e.g. clinicians out in the field? So that's easy. I would do it preferably over FaceTime so that you can interact with them face to face if you don't have the video ability, or through Slack, and just make sure you talk to the person about the best time of day to do it. Is it best at 1 p.m. on a Wednesday when you might be able to sit in your car after lunch and actually chat to me? Is it best to do in the morning before you get on the road and start to do your day? And just have that time booked in the calendar and use your phone or your video mechanism so that it is a face-to-face connection. Any plans to include a calendar link in the initial notification email so it can be easily added to calendars? Yes, that's a great suggestion, and it is on our product roadmap, so thank you for that. And Ivan, what's the best way to start one-on-ones without making people nervous? It's to make it safe to be nervous, Ivan, honestly. And that is to say to people, your first few one-on-ones, especially on video, might feel awkward, and that's okay. Just ride with the awkwardness. It's only going to help us and everyone develop as people and help that connection that we need and that so many people are desperately wanting as they're feeling more isolated and more uncertain with where we're at with COVID at the moment. There are absolutely plans to include the one-on-one as part of the phone app. Our mobile team are working on that at the moment. We have managers who sugarcoat feedback, but there are managers who are blunt and very straightforward. How do we balance? So I would go out with this particular deck that we'll send and let managers know to frame their feedback up situation, behaviour, impact, and make sure you point out to them not to sandwich negative or constructive feedback. So give a piece of What I mean by sandwich is give a piece of good feedback. Alex, you've done A, B, and C so well, but you really need to improve in areas B and C. Oh, but Alex, did I mention that you did this really well? Don't sandwich it. Make sure you isolate it and give constructive feedback in the situation behaviour impact. And if someone is blunt, by framing it in the SBI model, you're actually making sure that you're doing a good job. So I think we might call it, because we're down to 38 participants from over 200. So thank you to everyone for attending today. I'll work with Julia on any of the open questions we've got left, which are 18, and try and get those answers out to all of those who attended today. I can't thank you enough for attending though, and thank you to the suggestions that have been coming through. We'll also accumulate those around some more fun things to do, because I certainly am hearing from people that your organisations and your people might be getting a little bit tired of the remote work and of the current uncertain COVID situation. So what can you do that's fun and that doesn't cost a lot of money to get people re-engaged? So thank you everyone, and have an absolutely fantastic day. We really appreciate you attending. Bye.